reminder to cite your local municipality, and we'll go from there. Heather, if you could go ahead and call the roll.
Sure will. Let me pull up my list right now. All right, Stephen.
Present, Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Jennifer. Not here. Alan.
Yes, I'm here in Damray, France.
Sarah.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Jeffrey.
Jeff, here in Ann Arbor.
Camilla.
Here in Ann Arbor.
All right, Rita.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Alice.
Present, attending from Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Frank.
Eastport, Antrim County, Michigan.
Adam.
Here in my car in Okemos, Michigan.
On the road, Jack Kerouac.
And Councilmember Briggs.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Excellent. I think that means we have a quorum. Why don't we go to approval of the minutes from the last meeting of August 5th? Any questions or comments on the minutes?
I'd move their approval.
A second.
All right, got a motion and a second. All those in favor say, raise your hand and say aye. Or, all right, any nays? Okay, seeing none, the minutes are approved from the last meeting. We have 3 minutes of public comment per speaker. Heather, do we have any speakers for public comment?
We do. Robert Black. You should be able to go ahead and talk now.
Thank you, Heather. Nice to see you all again. And thank you for the opportunity to speak before you again tonight. Congratulations once again on your effective working session in July. I encourage you to carry out additional facilitated working sessions around specific themes to continue to build momentum for this important project. Speaking of momentum, the garden project reported to you by Jeff Crockett is an excellent example of how a coalition of community volunteers is forming the groundwork, so to speak, necessary to bring diverse members of the community together in common purpose. The upcoming FAN event, Fun Art Nutrition, which you'll hear more on this evening from Jeff Henney, is another step in the right direction to gradually activate the site, an opportunity to engage the public, gather their input, and build their support. And a key part of this effort here, in my opinion, is creating an identifiable image, a memorable name or logo for the Commons, or whatever name you may decide to call it, that will be used to market events and activities into the future and build public buy-in and trust. Another activation step is public art, with already good examples in the Black Lives Matter teaching mural at the library, the engaging community of people art on the Blake Transit Center, and David Zinn's Instagram ready Singing in the Rain mural. Building on these 3 strong examples of public art, perhaps we could start with a simple mural painted on the concrete wall that is backdrop to the garden. There are several well-known examples of delightful local mural projects like this, many led by the creative artists of Treetown Murals, who are really good at getting folks of any age involved, providing wonderful educational opportunities and attracting support from local businesses. Good art is really good business in this town. And discussion on these items fits well under your agenda item 7, community partnerships. But also for item 7, I strongly advocate for your exploring informal discussions with the potential block partners surrounding the library lot and Liberty Plaza. The initiating committee has already reached out for positive relationships with Jerusalem Garden and the University of Michigan Credit Union. However, in my opinion, there are 2 crucial players that will definitely impact the future of this community commons. First Martin Corporation and the Ann Arbor District Library. Cultivating positive relationships with these 2 especially will help to shape your work in the coming months and year. One of the public input speakers in your second meeting in April, Louis Saskes, asked, Why not have a representative from the AADL on the Council of the Commons? I support his idea and encourage you to reach out in whatever manner you decide to all the key players on the Commons block. Their positive engagement and willing participation will contribute to your success over time. Best of luck in your discussions tonight, and thank you. Was that 3 minutes, Heather?
We're around.
Little less than he rescinds his rest of his time. We appreciate you, Robert. Thank you for being here this evening.
Yes.
Any other speakers, Heather?
No, that's it.
All right, excellent. So with that, we will close public comment and move on to member news and updates. And I think we have a few pieces of news regarding FAN and other things. So Jeff, do you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. Can I share my screen here, Heather, or
Let me
try this
give you
again?
that permission.
What? Thank you.
Let me give you that permission.
Oh, I think Camilla, you wanted to say something?
No, you can go ahead first. Yeah.
Okay, sure,
Go ahead.
okay. I'll try and share my screen now. Can you see the presentation here?
I can.
Everybody see it?
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay. So I'll just be real quick. So here's some key developments since our last meeting as far as FAN is concerned. We decided to move the date up because of not enough time to get all the insurances and approvals and what have you. Originally it was going to be September 12th. We moved it up to October the 3rd, November the 7th, and November the 28th. We got our annual insurance from Kaepernick, which are the brokers who handle the Decadome folks, and they gave us a 1-year insurance policy for the equivalent of what it normally would have just been 1 or 2 events. So that was pretty great for them to do that. We got a provisional permit from Deborah Williams, and so we've been providing the information. I've paid for that and so forth. We have a target vendor list. Out of about 120 vendors, we culled it down to about 40, and we've been contacted, and we assume there'll be about somewhere between 10 and 15 ultimately. And we've put together marketing materials. I'll just show you a few things in a second. We've refined our budget, and we've gotten some selected sponsors. Financial commitments have been obtained. We've got an entertainer list developed, and contacts have been made with those entertainers. I'll give you one example. And we've put together Facebook marketing, and some artists have been contacted. I'll mention something about that. Robert referred to them, the folks. There are others as well, but I'll just talk a little bit about that briefly. And then we have a preliminary program design and sequencing developed, and a new website. We've redone our website. And I'll just, if I have time, I'll just say what our next steps are. Okay. So let's see if I can, so here's an example of some marketing materials. Can you see that, those materials? Mm-hmm. I think those have been kind of well received and kind of give the feel that we want to get across, just so you could see it. Heather sent out this presentation, and I've done a slightly updated one, which you may or may not send out. But anyway, so you have this. Here is I just found out this afternoon that we are able to get our lead entertainer, Maestro Kip Berry, who has a very successful cabaret and performing arts center in Anaheim, California. But he lives here in Ann Arbor, and he comes back every week. And he will be available for the October the 3rd event, and will be performing his magic act and his singing and dancing and everything else that he does. He's really quite an extraordinary performer. He's performed in 80 countries, been on 100 television shows, and was an honors graduate of the only magic college in the world, Chavez College of Magic. I believe it's in Michigan. Anyway, he's really a lot of fun, and he'll entertain the kids. And we'll have probably have a booth, or he'll be part of the Decadome to give kids some fun as well. But he'll be our lead. But we'll have other local folks, singers and artists, and just to keep things going while during the 4 hours that the event takes place, give people something to watch and be attracted to. So Robert mentioned the Treetown Murals folks. We met with them, and we're working out a way to have some entertainment, have chalk drawings and paintings and stuff during the event for kids and for other folks, and to have some illustrations about, we could put together potentially some temporary art that would be up and down, at each event, or be put in place, when there's not events going on. We'll have to obviously talk to the city about that, but obviously you can't do a mural on a whole lot of places in this lot, but there are a couple of places where nice murals and signage could be done. Treetown will also be consulting with us about signage that we would want to put up, temporary or some permanent. Again, we'd have to consult with the city about that. So that's that story. There's some examples of the kind of things they've done, temporary kinds of things and permanent kinds of things. They're very skilled at getting the community to actually do a lot of the painting. They do kind of the design, and then they get people to actually, it's sort of painting by the numbers, but it gets people engaged and gets people excited and so forth. It's fun to do. And they've done a lot of these successfully, and they've involved business in a lot. And so that's been a great positive. The garden, I just, put up a few slides here. It's still going great. This is part of our new website, which talks about the commons growing and being the center of the city. And then I just wanted to say that Robert mentioned that we'd been talking to the credit union, and the credit union has asked us what level they want us to contribute at. They seem very willing to sponsor what we're doing, as I think mentioned before. And there's a number of other organizations that have stepped up to do the same. So I think we're in pretty good shape. We've got our next steps are really going to be to sign up more of the vendors. We've signed up a few, but we're going to try to get everybody signed up as quickly as possible, and to really push that marketing out there to all the different potential partners. So that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. Any questions?
Yes.
Any questions at all for Jeff?
Yes, I have a question.
Sure.
I see that you have little badges or logos that say Ann Arbor Community Commons. Is this your name for it, or is it the city's name for it, or have we agreed on that? Is this promotion of something that does not yet exist?
Well, no, I mean, the initiating committee, the Ann Arbor Community Commons, is a Michigan nonprofit. And since we're kind of running this event, doing this event, so we're trying out different logos to see. I just put this together for your purposes. There's nothing official out there yet.
I did not know that the name of your nonprofit was Ann Arbor Community Commons, which is the name of the proposal that way back 10 years ago. And I think it's confusing, because I don't think we haven't, nobody knows what the name of this thing is yet. And so we're getting into that quagmire now of who's doing what and what it actually means or establishes. So I just have to stop there, because I'm really puzzled.
Sorry, Alice. What I'm trying to say is that it's not actually the Ann Arbor Community Commons. The nonprofit is the initiating committee of the Ann Arbor Community Commons.
Yeah, but it didn't initiate the report, and that's the name of the report. So I don't, we're in this quagmire again.
Okay, I mean, I've used this, we've all used this before, the previous meetings, and I didn't hear any objections. So obviously we need to consider what you're saying, but that's what everybody was okay with up until now. So if you have an issue with it, let's talk about it.
Well, it's different in speech than it is in print or in paint. This event produced, I like it. I like the idea of having fan. I just don't know if it's a good idea to kind of slide in a name that hasn't been settled on. I prefer center of the city, but
sorry,
that's not an entity either. But.
Okay, so Alice, are you saying that our nonprofit should not be called the initiating committee of the Ann Arbor Community Commons, or are you saying this term should not be used in association with FAN? Because our nonprofit.
I think they're kind of both. I mean, I can't control what you call your group, but it does. The name initiating committee of the Ann Arbor Community Commons is, first of all, really long, and second of all, still promotes the confusion between what we're doing as the Council on the Commons, as a city appointed commission, and your nonprofit. I think there's some confusion there.
Oh, okay. So I'd be interested in what other people think about that. I mean, I'm open to whatever you want me to do, but I mean, this is the first time I've heard this objection, and that name has been used as far back as the task force, and nobody ever objected to it.
Well, it's been used farther back than that. There was one that Alan and I came up with for the proposal. So, and that's, the proposal became city property for whatever reason. And so I had to give up, I don't know, we had to give up the ownership of that name. And now it's taken on a new life. And I don't know. I'm just confused, and I hope it doesn't confuse other people, because we're still so far away from naming this place.
So I don't want to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, and why don't we just focus? So Jeff, first of all, thank you for the update, and appreciate the fan event that you're planning. We can get into the discussion around if there is a discussion, frankly, around what the name of the initiating committee should be referred to. Ultimately, it is a nonprofit, and so I don't want to go down too much of a rabbit hole there with regard to what the name should be. I think the initiating committee of the fan event, it seemed to be at the last meeting that this was pretty widely supported, and folks are excited about this. And I certainly share that same excitement. So I think this is a great update from Jeff and the initiating committee event team. And I think why don't we just stick to that for at least for tonight's meeting, and go from there. Jeff, are there any other updates that from your end of things that you'd like to provide?
Not at the moment. I would just say that our next steps, like I said, are to kind of get the vendors on board and get the marketing really going, and finalize all the sponsorships and so forth. That's all I have at this point.
Yeah, I don't want to throw a bucket of rain on the fan events, but I think it sort of usurps some territory to incorporate a name that is selected by somebody. And you have a group, you have to have a name for your group, the sponsors, but I think the fan events is a good name for the event. I don't know how we reconcile that, so I'm not going to say any more about it at this time.
Is there any feedback for Jeff around the fan event, or things we have that are going to be happening on center of the city lot over the course of the fall?
I think Alan has his hand up, it looks like.
Yeah, Ellen, please feel free.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to comment on this last question besides my own report. The city council recognized the initiating committee of the Ann Arbor Community Commons. That's a name recognized by the city council on the 5th of October in 2020. That is the official name recognized by the city council. There's no ambiguity about it. And we've
So-
called this the Ann Arbor Community Commons since the time of the task force.
So I would just respectfully ask to all those involved here, I think it's probably not a very productive use of our time to debate the name of the nonprofit here that we're talking about. Totally respect a lot of folks' opinions and the reality of where we are at and what has brought us up to this point. But, I think our purpose for this event was to have Jeff update us a little bit on what was actually going on. And, certainly if there's a confusion piece, we can take that offline. But do want to just respect everybody's time tonight. We're at 7:30 already. And I, for one, would very much like to be done by 9 o'clock. So if we can keep moving on the updates related specifically to the fan event, I think that would be really helpful. I think Frank's got his hand up. Frank?
Unmute, Frank.
I'm not going to comment further on that. I was going to report on a couple items up and updates.
Good.
I think, Frank, you're the only one who has his or her hand up, so feel
Okay.
free.
I just wanted to report that the Library Green Conservancy has surpassed the $50,000 mark in outright gifts and pledges. Our initial goal continues to be to raise $100,000, and hopefully down the road, other goals will be set based on specific needs and aspirations as they evolve. It always feels good to get past the halfway mark in any campaign, I can tell you that. So I'm pleased about that. The other thing I wanted to report, and this involves both myself and Rita, we established initial contact with the Downtown Detroit Partnership. This turns out, we learned a bit in the initial contact, is a 100-year-old business consortium in the city of Detroit. And we had a very interesting initial conversation with a gentleman by the name of David Cowan, who's the Chief Open Space Officer. I love that title. We need one in Ann Arbor. Of the Downtown Detroit Partnership. And if people like David Cowan are in our communities around Michigan and around the country with wealth of knowledge and an eagerness to be helpful as we chart our course, we are going to be in good shape. So I just wanted to report that we've made that initial contact, and he's eager to be helpful to us and has a just very wide and deep knowledge on many, many issues that we're talking about and wrestling with here. So we were pleased and encouraged by that contact. And I don't know if Rita wanted to add anything to that.
Just that it was a wonderful conversation, inspiring, and I would be really happy for us to continue being in touch with this group and thinking about others.
Other groups, sure.
Excellent. Thank you for the update, Frank and Rita. Camilla also has her hand up. Camilla, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I was approached by a staff member of Ground Cover News to write an article on the Council of the Commons. The staff member specifically asked to introduce the Council of the Commons to the public, gives some history of the space and its politics, and then ideally open a method or a forum for interested readers to engage. I just wanted to let you know that this is going on. I don't want to blindside anybody, and I'm going to be really conscious about towing the line between representing my own opinions and then, representing myself as an elected member of this advisory body. If people have feedback, I'd love to hear it because there have been many more people who know more about the history than I do.
I think that's good and wonderful. And I think that we have an opportunity for you to maybe write tonight, based on what you heard this evening, obviously your participation in the previous meetings. So I think just from my perspective, I think it's a good thing that the opportunity is affronted to you. And, I'm sure you will do a very good job of representing our collective opinions. The fact that based on you've even been a moderator in some of these things. So
I think it's wonderful, Camilla. Very, very good news.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's excellent.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Let us know what you need from us, Camilla, if anything. But you're obviously more than capable. Alan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Heather sent out in our behalf, Odile and I, who's right over there. Yeah, we've been organizing the Peace Week from Sunday, September 19th through Saturday, the 25th, around the International Day of Peace, which is Tuesday, September 21st. And we've been doing Peace Day, Peace Weekend, Peace Week since 2015. And so it's a pretty interesting program. Everybody has some anxiety about the state of the world and peace and the unhappy extinction in which is progressing, and the doomsday clock but seconds before midnight. So peace is on everyone's mind, both locally and globally. And we have a program that begins with actually the fostering a culture of peace and nonviolence, which is one of the recommendations out of the task force, is the vision of the commons and bringing art to the commons, and what are the questions that need to be on the peace table, what are the discussions that can go on that are on people's minds, and how to search for knowledge. We will have some exposition of books for giveaway and sale, and conclude on Saturday the 25th with restating the visions that people have as to how to advance peace in the world, peace in the community, and what's on people's mind. So you saw the basic outline of the program, which is subject to certainly change and development as it develops. So really, we hope that people can participate in that. And it's the kind of program that goes on, that has gone on this city. So it's part of our framework of what we're doing. And everyone is invited. It's basically an open show, and we'll see what all happens. And I guess that is my report on that. And I guess it also might fall into the question of community partnerships, because this sort of program is the kind of thing that goes on the common, and hopefully more thereof. And on other days that are recognized on the calendar, People's Day, Human Rights Day, United Nations Day, Women's Day, so on, are all the kinds of activities that are, the center of the city activity. So that is the report. It's not a specific program of the initiating committee, of which I am also a part. It's just something that I've been involved in with Odile and many other people since 2014, I think, was the first one that we did on the center of the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Odile. Councilmember Briggs.
A follow-up question for Camilla, and then Adam, I didn't know if it was useful for us to do the update to this, if this is where you wanted to talk about kind of.
Can you be a little louder, please?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll ask the follow-up question first. So Camilla, for the article, you mentioned that the request was to do an article about the Council of the Commons. I just wasn't sure. I wanted to ask for clarification. Is it actually about the commission itself, or is it an article really about the space?
It's a good clarifying question. I'm not entirely sure. I can get back to you. I would assume it's both.
Okay, yeah, just curious. And then Adam, is this a good spot on the agenda to discuss what happened at the last council meeting with regards to meet?
Why don't we do that at the next agenda item, actually?
Okay.
Any other points regarding member updates?
I dropped into that the ground cover September issue has a brief outline of the program of the Peace Week.
Excellent. Any other member updates before we move on to community partnerships agenda item? Okay.
Adam, excuse me.
Oh yeah, sorry, Rita. Go ahead.
This isn't an update, but we missed the part about approval of the agenda. And I do have a thing that I would like us to discuss. Ideally, it would be tonight, but I don't know if we have time. So the issue that I would like us to discuss is a plan for the Council of the Commons, for us, to have a plan and some targets of activities as we move forward, so that we have goals.
Yes, so I apologize for missing the approval of the agenda, but you are totally right, Rita, and that was obviously part of what our plan was this evening. So why don't we go ahead and approve the agenda for the evening, and then we can get into, since we've already approved the minutes from last meeting, we can get into what is going to be on the agenda here. So can we have a motion to approve the agenda for this evening?
So moved.
So moved. We have a second? Okay. All in favor of the agenda this evening, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Excellent. So with that, why don't we get into community partnerships? And Rita, we can talk, I think about, community partnerships, I think on this agenda item is meant to be a little more fluid with what, we're thinking about here. So I think it was intended to discuss a little bit about what happened and transpired at the last city council meeting, Councilmember Riggs' suggestion, but also to talk a little bit about some of the work that you and Frank have been doing in other communities and decide how we want to do this work going forward. So I think first, why don't we talk a little bit about, we'll cede the floor to Councilmember Briggs, and she can highlight a little bit of what she would like to highlight. And then we can get into some of the good work that you, Rita, and Frank have been doing. So Erica, why don't we turn over to you first?
So you probably, I'm sure you all received the email from Adam that gave an update as to what happened at the last council meeting. So I think you're up to speed on this. But essentially, we, as council, received a fair amount of push concerns around this resolution that had come forward from this commission with the recommendation of bringing food carts as an activation technique to the center of the city. And, you know, this is something that kind of we had mentioned had come up in our discussions in July, I think, that we might want to get some feedback from stakeholders and see what they thought. But we had.
Can you be a little louder, please?
Yes, sorry, this computer's microphone doesn't work as well as I would hope. So anyway, we received feedback from the Main Street Area Association and from businesses downtown about concerns about essentially bringing food trucks into this space, particularly following a very difficult time for businesses downtown. So I think it was based on the stakeholders, the community partners that were providing that feedback. It seemed that there would be Adam and I. Adam did a fair amount of work because I was actually up trying to camping at Pictured Rocks with no connectivity when all of this happened. And I'll let him report on those conversations with Main Street Area Association, but it seemed advisable to take that feedback that we were getting from not exactly official block partners, but from community stakeholders and figure out what would be an activation strategy that might be met with greater support. And so I was regretful to have to, you know, to pull that from the agenda, but I didn't want to have the first thing that brought to council from the commission be met with so much controversy, I guess, immediately based on the feedback we were getting. So, Adam, you might want to add to that, and I will work on my microphone.
Yeah, so I think that I think Erica highlighted you know, some of the more direct points. You know, I would just like to say that I think that when we started out this process a few months ago, you know, we were talking about who would be interested in being a partner and who would be, you know, interested in helping us move forward on these things. And so I often found that in those discussions that scope of who we were thinking might be, you know, limited in some regards, you know, and we were mostly focused on those who we thought were interested. And I think the fact that we put forward a resolution and it was met with some resistance actually, in consequence, provided us with an opportunity to try and bring in additional people who are certainly partners in the downtown area and have the ability to help us move something forward. And so while I am absolutely in no means stating that the Main Street Area Association is interested in helping that, I don't think they're an obstacle in helping us accomplish our goals here. And so I feel like this is an opportunity to build partnership in a real serious way. And so, and based on the conversations I've had, of which I don't particularly want to get into the exact details this evening, you know, I feel like there is a real constructive way of utilizing this opportunity. And I think that's what Erica and I saw on that day of the city council meeting, that we had a real opportunity to either meet obstruction head on and not have it be constructive, or to turn it into a way of trying to build partnership. And I think that we chose the latter. That was part of the reason that I sent out the email to all of you and noted that. And I think we are still working on that. You know, it's by no means settled. We frankly do not have a ton of resolution on this, but I think that we are in a constructive spot. And I'd like us to give some weight to the fact that we have the ability to build additional partnership in this. and that ultimately, if we all want this effort to be successful, it is about community, and it is about engaging more members of the community to help move this forward. And so, I would just like to state that that's, I think, where we're at right now. I think we have an opportunity. We are by no means out of the woods with trying to, broaden support, but I think there is a healthy and constructive process that we're engaged in right now. And so, while certainly I'd love it to move as fast as I think we all wanted to during the last Council of the Commons meeting, I actually think that this provides us with a unique catalyst that we didn't when we all voted for that resolution last time. We didn't have when we all voted for the resolution last time. And so I'm a optimist by nature. I think that's what you got to have when you look at public policy. And I encourage everyone else to hopefully share in the same optimism that Erica and I have in moving this far, because I really do think there is the opportunity. It's much better to have more people talking about what you're trying to do, even if some may have opinions that they want to shape it a little bit, but are not necessarily opposed, than to have nobody talking about what you want to do. And I felt that this is very much the case with this opportunity. So that's the only addition I'd like to add. Feel free to have any questions that you have regarding where we're at in the resolution.
I just wanted to make a point, I put my hand up here earlier, that I have made it my business, along with Dana, to reach out very widely to the Main Street folks. And we have not focused on food trucks or anything like that at this point. We have gone out to all the restaurants we can find, all the community organizations and local shops and so forth, mainly in the Main Street area and so forth, have been talking to them, and that's our focus because we recognize that's extremely important. So you can be assured that's top of mind.
Jeff, thank you. Frank?
I just want to kind of second and support what you've said. In this initial conversation with the gentleman from the Detroit partnership, it was clear that the business community is front and center in all the positive activity that is developed around 7 downtown Detroit parks and open spaces. And it's kind of obvious when you think about it that who would have a greater stake in this than the community of businesses that operate not only on the block, but in concentric circles around the center of the city. And so I think we can, positively engage these businesses and the associations that represent them in conversation. And so I'm wholeheartedly in support of what you've observed already.
Anyone else?
I can add a little bit more of some feedback that I also received that might be helpful to this group as that resolution was coming forward. I heard strong support for the nonprofits that are activating the space, working, the fan sort of approach of having that approach in terms of short-term activation. That was I was definitely hearing support from that on from some council members. I also heard from both the community and a interest that this commission might focus in terms of thinking about activation, thinking about more about Liberty Square Plaza as a place to start as well. That might be an easier place to start with activation a little more, just and also focus support for focusing in on the long-term design components of things. And so that's some additional feedback that I kind of heard from community and a limited feedback from council as this resolution is coming forward for a couple of days. And so I think that's just some pieces that we might carry forward with us about thinking about what we can do next. It may take us a little bit more time to figure out, working with community partners, what is that strong short-term activation that's going to work for us, but we do have money on the table that we need to work with on that's focusing on physical design. And I do hope when Rita talks about what's our plan, that is an area I want us to spend a fair amount of time. And I think there's definitely opportunity to be thinking about the entire site that was, entire space that was, that voters consider center of the city.
Thank you, Councilmember Briggs. Others, anyone else on this topic?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I totally support the feedback you've gotten. I do think we very much need to involve Liberty Plaza and look at the long-term critical. The reason why Liberty Plaza has not been part of this initial fan series is because of a couple of things. One, I was going to have some difficulty getting insurance to cover that because of some issues that are out there, which would need to be addressed. And I think we can be helpful in addressing them, but it's not something I could do this early on, without consulting the council, and I could get into a quagmire. Also, my understanding, and I may be wrong about this, but my understanding is that the Liberty Plaza comes under the Parks Department. And so that makes it a little more complicated. And so I didn't want to get into that situation again without due consultation. And so that's the reason. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. Rita, you have your hand up. You're muted still, Rita. Sorry.
Sorry. I was just going to ask Erica if you could explain a little more about the comments about the long-term activation that you mentioned.
Yeah, I think just that we there was support that council had supported this physical design of the space, and that's definitely something that there's interest in seeing the commission moving forward with, and getting that RFP out there and really working with the community to understand what is our proposed design for this space. So just not extensive feedback on that, just continued support to see the commission working on that element.
Okay, so there was support, in other words.
Yeah. I think,
okay,
exactly, continued support, interest in seeing us move that forward.
Okay, thank you.
I would argue that in order for us to do that as professionally as we can and involve as much of the community as we can, I think it would be good to have some more of these facilitated sessions and working groups perhaps associated with focusing on that. And as I said before, we can make a small contribution to that by collecting some information, further information to help the process over the fan events. But obviously, this design element, we obviously need to bring a lot more input to bear and to have some of these sessions. That would be my opinion. I don't know how other people feel about that, but I totally support that notion. We have to do that.
So I think it's actually a very good prelude into the next topic of discussion, which is really an effort that Frank and Rita have led. And I guess I just saw Alan's hand pop up here. So before we get into that, we'll give the floor to Alan. But then I think we should really talk about some interest in other communities that Frank and Rita have been looking into, and how that plays into a forward-thinking role related to that design element. So Alan, the floor is yours, but then we're going to turn it directly over to Rita and Frank.
Well, I do think it's important to see how other communities have developed open space and center of the city focus. I wanted to say, as we began to look to the longer view, that there have been a lot of ideas out there, and there's some drawings that I'm glad that people will begin to look at what is the picture of how to create a central park and a civic center, which is viewed as a building, something that is four-season, that we have to figure out how that fits into the physical capacity of the space, and whether there are additional facilities that can be drawn into the commons, in particular the Noble House and Carriage House that the Martin Company said they'd be interested in having the city take over, and that could serve particularly the Noble House as, at least on the first floor, which could be made accessible as a social center, as an adjunct to the community that finds Liberty Plaza as its itinerant home. So I'm very interested in this longer view, and I think that the pictures that Stefan Trendoff developed not so long ago have been shared with the Council of the Commons, and maybe that could be shared further for people to look at, of how the various elements can fit together. But I wanted to back to the more immediate, to see, I think one of the things that we really need is the calling into service of the so-called block group. That is one of the recommendations in one of the task force, and one of the elements of the city council resolutions on this, that block group of the immediate, basically the immediate neighbors, be convened so that people can see that we're all partners in this common development. And reflecting also on Robert Black's comments that the First Martin Corporation and the Public Library need to be brought into these conversations, and they've sort of stepped to the side watching what happens rather than being invited into the actual conversations. So there are big elements who have been silent in our conversations, and we need to hear their voices. Furthermore, from the very beginning, all resolutions have said, remove the surface parking on the parking lot so that it can actually begin to be used as a public space and develop. And that's what, when we have a public program, we got to go through a whole process to get the DDA and the Republic Parking and the community services to agree that the cars are off so that people can go on. And I just wish that long-term or long commitment or instruction from the city council would be carried forward to instruct the DDA with the Republic Parking to terminate the surface parking on the lot. It was never intended as a surface parking lot. There only until further development takes place, and that is a center of the city central park. And so if we would carry out what has already been mandated, to create a block group of the immediate neighbors and partners, and to remove the surface parking, we would then have a little more momentum towards seeing how the community can begin to use this space and see from the bottom up what people actually want to do. So that's my comment on this. I'm glad that we would move also forward to see how we envision a long-term development that would see the integration of Liberty Plaza, a connection between Liberty Plaza and the current library parking lot, and the creation of a four-season civic center building of some sort as part of this total downtown center of the city development.
Thank you, Alan. So I'd like to turn over to Rita and Frank to talk a little bit about some of the research they've been doing. potentially make a proposal for some initial next steps. Rita, Frank, feel free.
Well, I guess I'll start because I see Frank's muted for the moment, but jump in,
Okay,
Frank.
go ahead.
I think we're just trying to explore at a very elementary level, connecting with communities that have downtown open spaces. And that had come about as a result of just some brainstorming, really, with initiating committee members, talking about Detroit, Plymouth, Dexter as local examples. I consider them all local. And we would certainly like to, the thought was to just make a connection and see what would happen. And so it's like, I can't tell you how excited I was after talking with David Cowan. And I really believe that everyone in this group would appreciate listening to him describe what he's done, and his team of people that he works with. It is definitely a coalition of business and this group as support, and it will call on us to figure out some things that we need to do for us locally. But it's sort of like, I don't want to like read you the book because it was so exciting. It's like, I don't want to, I'd sort of like you all to experience it. It really is impressive, the service that they've provided for their downtown. So the proposal from my perspective is that we start forming an approach to work groups or committees or whatever we want to call them that will investigate how other places do this, and set some criteria, some descriptive information that we would like from each, so that we can either investigate it as a whole group and bring in speakers or whatever of representatives of these places, or compile information that we would review as a group. That would be up to the council to make that kind of a decision. So I think I'll stop there, and Frank, please jump in. And let me say that Frank made this first connection, and I'm really happy that he did.
I couldn't have said it better, Rita. I just think there's great potential for learning from other communities that have tackled these challenging issues. And Detroit, as I mentioned, this is a 100-year organization that has obviously morphed over the years and decades. And there was a conservancy formed at the time of Detroit's 300th birthday in 2001. And that conservancy now is a subsidiary of the Downtown Detroit Partnership. But again, we could talk about some of the details of the conversation. They have developed a funding mechanism for much of their activity. It's both private fundraising, but they also have tax incremental financing district that they've established there. And so it's the other thing is that I think other communities around the country have been looking at Detroit and seeing what has happened. David alluded to working on, in partnership with other communities around the country to understand their issues. And of course, Detroit learns from that, but the communities that they work with also learn from the Detroit experience. So it just seems like we're at a stage where we need to accelerate our learning about what really works. And I think we'll find that these are going to be different in each community. I don't know nearly as much, and I don't know a lot yet about Detroit, but I would encourage people to look at the Downtown Detroit Partnership website and click on a lot of the drop downs. I would say in a half hour, no more than an hour, you can really delve into this, as a preview before we proceed further. But Plymouth is another intriguing place. That, as I understand it, and we have not personally talked to anybody in Plymouth, but Jeff Crockett, who has spoken in public comment has started with a foundation over there that's been very generously supporting Kellogg Park. And my understanding at a very superficial level is it's the city of Plymouth, it's the Downtown Development Authority, and the Chamber of Commerce have formed some kind of a working relationship with the with this foundation as well. So I think each community is going to reveal something a bit different, but I think we'll learn from it, and in the process, over time we'll figure out, well, what's going to work in Ann Arbor. And probably the biggest takeaway from our conversation with David Cowan is, which is staring us right in the eyes anyhow, is we've really got to engage the business community as major long-term stakeholders in this process.
I would just add that, oh, excuse me, I just want to say that David was extremely generous with his time with us and offered to continue the conversation.
Yeah.
Can we draw him into one of our meetings as a participant?
I would think that would be,
yeah.
at the appropriate time, I think that would be very much a possibility.
Maybe
So, Alan? Oh, go ahead, Alan, sorry.
Well, the thought of the facilitated discussion that we had before and that Robert Black referred to again as it being a useful form might be an opportunity to draw him in as a participant in our discussion.
Just a thought, Adam, I could see these committees that are matched up with communities and with a kind of a common agenda so we can gather information that's comparable. An outgrowth of that could be, focused, facilitated discussions with, speakers from these communities who could that might be a process to think about.
I think we're all thinking along the same lines here. Certainly, Frank, I think that, sort of what we've had a chance to trade emails on, and certainly what you and Rita have shared this evening, and what Alan's thought process is, I think actually there's a lot of commonality here, which is, this would be a great first step on a long-term visioning for this council to really start to investigate other communities and what is working. We have I don't know if this is the correct term, but sort of gotten hung up on what the limitations are of our current space. And maybe what the reality is that we need to be a little bit more visionary and not seek to necessarily determine what the limitations are for a new wheel that we have to create, but really look to what others have done. And so I think that, the outreach that you, Rita, and Frank have done has been very helpful. And I'd like to make a proposal that maybe as a series of next steps, we form, I think the technical term by our bylaws is a committee or a series of committees that each highlight different communities. And we can obviously form these as needed and add to them as needed, but we try and identify, a series of maybe half a dozen communities initially that we feel we want to look into to draw examples from. And certainly, Alan, to your point about bringing forward individuals who serve in those communities in similar roles to us, how we can tap into their expertise, bring them to the full Council of the Commons if necessary, but certainly inform the work is probably a good use of our time to try and illustrate some of those examples. So I'd like to make that proposal going forward so that we can identify some communities, at least initially. There's by no means a limitation on this list, but at least a few communities initially, assign folks to help investigate those communities. And as Rita stated, maybe even assign some minimum criteria for which we want to make sure that every committee investigates from neighboring communities, neighboring meaning quite broadly in this particular case. So I'd like to see what others' thoughts are on that proposal. And I know Alan has his hand up. We'll go to him first, but see what other folks' thoughts are on that proposal as well. Alan?
Yeah, I support that proposal. I don't want to sidetrack it, but I do want to call into the conversation that the enthusiasm for Detroit is not universal. And it was brought to my attention a book that analyzed the development of Detroit in relation to the poor and Black community that has been in some way bypassed in the organization of the downtown development. And I think I will share, I hope that Heather can share with you all a review of a book that did a very detailed analysis of how the Detroit development has functioned in relation to the African American community and the poor communities around the center of Detroit. So there are many partners in here, and sometimes when the emphasis is on the business community, the poorer people are left out of the picture. And the development of the commons is very much a development that sees the base as the actual whole population of the community. And so I just want to put that in, and I will share through Heather the review of this very interesting book of detailed research. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. I frankly, I share your sentiments too, by the way. I think that it's very hard to argue that the neighborhoods in Detroit have not necessarily benefited from the same development that downtown has. But I also want to keep us thinking about the fact that we're not just talking about Detroit. Obviously, Rita and Frank used an example of the DDP. There are certainly very positive examples that exist around the efforts they've done, but certainly the efforts around equity. I know many have expressed those desires here, and I share those sentiments. And I think that in general, what the proposal that I'm making is related to is, looking at the constructive features and also the effects, somewhat negative in some cases, that we can learn from other communities, so that we don't make the same negative effects or gentrification that maybe some communities have mistakenly gone down, maybe by accident, frankly, not by malfeasance. So, Jeff, your hand is up. Please feel free.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, so I had the honor a number of years ago. I was a trustee of the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan, and one of my responsibilities was to engage with the city of Detroit, a very relatively poor area of the city of Detroit, the Island View area down there. And it's anchored by a fairly dynamic Episcopal church called the Church of the Messiah. And Barry Randolph is the pastor down there. And he is a sort of leading light in the city to try to get the poorer members of the community more engaged in the economic development. And I helped him put together plans for doing that, entrepreneurial training, education, putting some businesses in place and so forth. And as part of my role, and funneled some resources from the Episcopal Diocese. So I had a pretty good understanding of what the issues were then. This was about 7 or 8 years ago, but Barry's still very active. And the key really was to, as part of keeping the community, the lesser powerful, lesser wealthy members of the community engaged in the development process, was to bring this entrepreneurial training and entrepreneurial dimension to, and helping them build businesses as part of the process. So that's one point I wanted to make. The second one is, and we had a fair amount of success. The second one was to the other extreme. There are 2 or 3 or 4 places in Europe and one or two in other parts of the world, India in particular, and in Latin America, that have had some extraordinary things happen in terms of this kind of thing. And I'm not saying we want to overextend ourselves and going too far afield, but I think there's some experiences there that we can learn something from as well, which I know quite well. And I think there are plenty of people who are willing to Zoom with us from those communities to talk about, you know, what they did and what's going on, because we are part of an international network, whether we recognize it or not, of cities that are trying to transform themselves in the current environment and get more central engagement. So I think we should not ignore that dimension. Be very careful not to spread our resources too thin, but we should, you know, get some input as well from a broader story. Okay, thanks.
Very good points, Jeff. Frank, you got your hand up here.
You know, to Alan's point, we don't want to restrict our learning to, you know, what's gone well and right in these communities. We want to learn from things that they've attempted that haven't worked, or that they haven't attempted and they should have. So it's, I guess, 360-degree learning. There, I've coined it. I guess. The other thing is that I think this process of identifying communities and individuals from the council, we may eventually want to add people outside the council, but I think we should start within, as a way to get us all engaged. I'm going to call out Sarah for a moment. And Rita and I got to know Sarah back earlier in the summer, and we're just so impressed with her urban issues background and professional credentials that I'm eager to, you know, involve everybody on the council. And there's a lot of talent here, a lot of good background, and so I think this is a mechanism to do that as well. I hope it was okay to highlight you over there. I got a smile. Okay, I'm okay.
You're fine. I'm going through lists like cities that I've worked with in my head to try to figure out.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So are there other thoughts on the idea of a, you know, proposal? I think we can actually take some time, and I think it'd be a very good idea. You know, all of or many of you put forward offline last time a number of ideas of examples of things we should consider for highlighting in the city council resolution. So I actually think that process was actually quite good in terms of trying to generate ideas. I'd like to propose we do a similar process here, where we don't necessarily at this meeting this evening suggest specific communities to highlight, but maybe we agree to form a few, maybe three, given the number of representatives we have on the Council of the Commons, three committees rather, specifically, where we investigate a series of communities, and you all everyone here submits ideas of communities that we would like to consider to Heather, and we break up those communities individually. That way it's somewhat random, frankly, and we maybe can learn something from communities that we weren't necessarily thinking of, but we are inclusive with all of our thought processes with suggestions. So I'd like to sort of make that suggestion that if we want to go down this route of community committees, maybe is a good way to describe it, we also go down the route of suggesting offline which communities we think we should consider, and then dividing those up individually. So I think we got a couple hands up here. Erica, Alice, and actually 4 hands up. Erica, Alice, Stephen, and Sarah, not necessarily in that order, but maybe we'll go that order. Erica, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I like the idea of having a committee that focuses in on doing some research and around best practices and identifying what that criteria would be. I'm just a little confused about the recommendation for 3 different committees kind of doing the same work, as opposed to just one committee that is comprised of whoever here would like to volunteer to be on that subcommittee. And then amongst that one subcommittee, the work would be divvied up. So I was just curious why you were thinking about it being multiple committees.
Mostly because I think there's, at least historically, this council has seemed to be more focused on a council of the whole. And so if there is just a small number of people that would like to focus on this issue, I don't think I have any objection to that. But it seemed just to be that there was a stronger interest in the past of not having a smaller subset of the council to focus on issues. So, that's really the only reason I suggested that we try and engage more members of the council. But, don't have any objection if it is just a few. I think we had Alice, Stephen, and Sarah. Alice, do you want to go next?
Yes. So committees, all of which would be doing the same work, or a committee, it's a little bit fuzzy here. But one suggestion I would have is to think of, if you want to look at a whole lot of communities, and you need to split the labor between those, among those cities, to study these cities or make contacts with them, or communities. It doesn't even have to be cities. There are about four areas where it would be good to compare the same four areas of interest in each city. So like how each project or city has addressed administration or funding or physical aspects that were transformed, perhaps. What the physical aspects had to do with what they did. So those are three areas. I think there's yet another one that I had in mind, but so that we get a comparison of the different ways that in specific areas, not to miss one in each case. Otherwise we'll just have this way. Hey, I like that way. Or this way. Maybe this could work in Ann Arbor. But you can see how if there's any difference or commonality in the way that they approached administration, finance, and maintenance or regulation, whatever we want to settle on. We should look at those specific areas so that we will address our own questions about our own site. Not skip over them in any case. You want to have, okay, we studied this city and they did this, and this for those four things. This city did it this way. You might find commonalities and you might find significant differences or realistic applications. I just don't want to copycat, say Seattle or something. Just because we like that city and the way they did it doesn't mean it's going to work here. But if we study the exact categories of things, that might help us sort through the sea of both subjects and subject areas. That's it. Take my hand down.
Stephen?
Thank you. I fully agree with what Erica said. I feel like there's one committee here, maybe not multiple committees here. I fully agree with what Alice said. I feel like if we're going to step into this, we ought to have some way of measuring sort of apples to apples, or trying to get consistent criteria or questions that we're asking about these different projects. And I guess my own original thought maybe is just one way to sort of a taxonomy for this, may be able to think of other cities or other locations within Michigan, similar tax structure, similar business, communities, whatever. Maybe look at communities outside of Michigan, but also in the United States, and then maybe look at communities outside of the United States as ways to kind of divvy up the different examples that may be out there. Thanks.
Sarah?
Thanks. So I also agree with what Alice said in terms of like a research process, if this is a road that we're going to go down. And I guess, I've worked with parks departments across the country. I've worked with, individual developers who have developed parks across the country. And so I'm trying to wrap my head around, like, what exactly are we trying to figure out? Like, what are we looking for similar park types? I mean, I wrote a whole report on like transforming parking lots into parks. Like, maybe there's examples in there that might work, but then there's also examples of like bigger parcels, but like the partnerships that were formed to fund that might make sense. So I guess like there's an entire universe of like examples out there. So I think, before we just start throwing out like examples of parks we think are nice, like we really need to somehow, like Stephen was saying, like come up with criteria. And maybe we all just need to like think on that for a bit, because I'm not really sure like where my head wants to go. I like this approach. I just like, I'm not entirely sure I don't know of any other park that's really comparable to the situation that we have here. So it's kind of like cobbling together like a bunch of things that worked that might work for funding or design or things from other parks across the country.
I think Alan is next.
Yeah, it seems like we're moving towards some convergence. I liked what Alice said in trying to lay out criteria, and she said she had 4 in mind and mentioned 3, so I've been trying to put a word around the 4th, and you, Adam, put out that word equity, and I think that is one of the factors we have to look at. What is the bottom-up democratic participation development element of what is going on in these various places? So that should be part of what we look at, and I think it's great if we can pick some cities and see whether we have one committee or it breaks down into 3 subcommittees or whatever. Everybody can't do everything, but that we should have some common framework to look at and as best we can see what we can learn from other places. But the democratic bottom-up quality is essential to the sense of a commons. So we're really seeing how the users of commonly pooled resources are able to more effectively control and utilize and create a framework of conduct around those resources that, as Eleanor Ostrom demonstrated in her Nobel Prize in research, is more productive than when either the government does it or it's delegated to some private corporation. And how we see that use of the users of the resources actually the energizing element. So equity, I guess, is maybe one word to put into these criteria.
Very good point, Alan. I think we've got Frank and then Rita.
This has been helpful, and I appreciate Alice's list, which we can continue to fill out and understand. But I think common criteria studied across various situations. I was just reflecting back what motivated me personally to begin to identify communities and understand how they achieve what they're achieving, and it gets back to what I've expressed is what is the public-private contract or partnership? How have public entities like the DDA and the City of Ann Arbor coalesced in partnership with community organizations, groups like the Library Green Conservancy and the Initiating Committee in our case, but other groups. Detroit had this, Detroit 300 Conservancy that was formed almost 20 years ago. So I'm looking at kind of the larger structure and wanting to learn about that, not to the exception or the detriment of, how did they work with a particular park situation or whatever, but how did they form this community partnership? And these things evolve, but the ones that have been successful, I'm sure we can learn from the things they did right and things they did wrong along the way by their own reflection and our observation. So that's where I think this could be most valuable, but that's just my opinion.
Thank you, Frank. We got Rita and then Councilmember Briggs.
I just want to say I think this discussion is great, and I absolutely agree with having common elements that we would use to compare across communities or projects or whatever we're going to be examining. And I believe that each of us has some ideas that would be contributing to that kind of discussion. Thinking of, in my mind, we're setting up a table with elements that we'll look at and versus cities or wherever these kind of things happen. So I just want to add one more element, which would be a time frame that we set a target by which this kind of study or whatever we want to call it is completed, or that we attempt to complete it, so that we don't have a long extended kind of thing. I don't think this is a thesis. This is gathering ideas and looking at them and then figuring out where we want to go. That's my idea.
All right. Thank you, Rita. Councilmember Briggs.
Yeah, just to support what Sarah and kind of Frank added on to, I think in terms of really what is our purpose of looking at these communities, I think I agree that it is that public-private partnership that really needs to be explored a little bit more. I mean, we can see what our group has struggled with a little bit, and we can anticipate what are going to be struggles to come after a design is formalized. So funding partnerships to successfully fund a space are clearly questions that we're going to need to have answered. And then operational models are something that we are currently struggling with. So those are, if two things that I could imagine would be helpful pieces, those are ones that I would hope we'd focus on.
Thank you, Erica. Jeff?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a couple of observations. One is, certainly when we think about innovation, for example, and hopefully Ann Arbor is going to be innovative in what we do. That's our tradition, and hopefully that will continue. And obviously we have unique circumstances as everybody does. One of the things that I teach when I teach innovation is you want to try to achieve insight. And insight is composed, from my perspective, of 3 dimensions. One is patterns of the past, what has happened historically, so hindsight. The other one is what's called outsight, where you're looking at other people, other models, what other people have been doing. And sometimes you want to step outside the model of cities or towns. You might want to go into something completely different. You might learn some kind of tool or idea that would work in a unique situation like Ann Arbor. So you don't necessarily just want to look at your own industry, so to speak, as other models, but you might want to be a little creative about thinking about borrowing something from somewhere else. Just to use a silly example, Henry Ford, didn't invent the automobile. What he did was he put the assembly line together with building a cheap automobile, and he learned that from the arms manufacturers and the chocolate manufacturers. Okay, so he didn't go to other car companies because they were all building stuff for rich people, right? And they were all bespoke. They weren't low-cost, mass-produced. Anyway, I don't want to get too off in the academic woods here, but anyway, that's the one thing. And then the third element, so you've got hindsight, outsight, and then you've got foresight. And there you're looking at scenarios of the future. And you have to use the novelist or science fiction writer's idea or way of thinking when you do that. And you have to try to imagine possible end states that would be desirable or attractive to people and work back from there to see where what the steps you would have to go through to get there. And so if you put those 3 together, hindsight, patterns of the past, outside, other models, and then imaginative scenarios of the future, you put those 3 things together, you get profound insight, and that's where truly creative or innovative stuff comes from. Okay, that's one dimension. The other dimension is the big elephant in the room that every city that I know about, that I'm looking at when it comes to these issues, is grappling with, is the whole issue of sustainability. And, I don't know how that would necessarily fit in with the immediate goals that we have here, but I think it needs to be, borne in mind. We have a very large sustainability effort going on in the city of Ann Arbor, and every other city is either looking at that or doing something like that. And a lot of times you look at cities, and what's happening is the center of the city is actually becoming the place where people start to think about how you would radiate out from the center of the city a new model of sustainability for the whole city. It becomes kind of a catalyst or trigger. So I think, talking to, Missy Stoltz's group and the sustainability people would not necessarily be a bad idea when we think about what kind of designs, what kind of central focus we're going to have and how that connects with the rest of what's going on. Okay, thanks.
So to try and summarize a little bit about kind of, I think, what we're hearing here, let me just get a show of hands. Who is interested in being part of a subcommittee on one or more aspects of this regarding other communities? And certainly we can break it up in a variety of ways. Can we get a show of hands on that? Okay. So I think that's most folks. So, I feel like we have a couple of variable options here. Where we can establish common criteria and break up subcommittees based on community. Or potentially we could break up subcommittees based on criteria and investigate the same communities for those similar criteria. Maybe I'm missing something, but it feels like in order to isolate variables, we want to go down one of those two routes. And if folks feel like I'm limiting my thinking, please feel free, because I certainly am not intending to do that. But it feels like, we've essentially got to choose one of two pathways, and then we need to generate some ideas for how we're going to structure those committees in one of those two pathways.
Would you describe those again? I didn't quite get it.
Yeah, so it sounds like we have a couple of proposals on the table, if I'm correct in my understanding. One is we create subcommittees that are based upon identifying together or offline by submission a series of common criteria, and then the subcommittees investigate all of those criteria inclusively based on a community. So for instance, choose Plymouth, Michigan, and we want to investigate how they are structuring their center of the city area, how they are being more inclusive for equity purposes, how they are funding it, how they are structuring it from a use perspective, et cetera. So that's one option as I see it. Or we then structure a series of subcommittees that say for Plymouth, Dexter, Detroit, Traverse City, Portland, wherever, we want to investigate in one committee the funding sources, and in another committee the usage opportunities, and in another subcommittee the how we're dealing with making sure that we're not gentrifying the community. So I feel like we have a couple of, maybe I'm wrong on this, at least in my thinking, but in hearing everyone talk this evening, it seemed to be that we had, essentially one of two tracks where we could be more community specific, but greater numbers of questions, and therefore influence some variability in our research. Or we could be more structured in our elemental research, what we're looking to obtain from each community, but be across many communities in a subcommittee. So I feel like there's a couple of options here. Maybe I'm missing something, And like I said, please feel free if you think I am to correct me on this, but in terms of like moving forward, those are the two sort of pathways that I seem to be hearing from folks' comments.
I would suggest, I mean, I would to some degree leave this up to the I think I saw 5 or 6 hands go up of folks that wanted to serve on this committee, but personally, I would recommend the first suggestion of reaching out to a community and trying to determine that information. Having done research like this in the past, I find that it's often one person who knows all this information. It'd be kind of horrible to have 5 people from this commission reach out to the same person about that. So I think it'd be a little more efficient use of time to go with one person trying to reach out to a community, but I will trust whatever the committee decides.
I think we got a few hands up here. I'm not sure who put their hands up first, so we'll just go in order as I see it. Rita, Alice, Sarah.
Rita?
All right. I'll just speak quickly. I agree with what Erica just said. My brief experience with talking with David Cowan, I just found that things just sort of, you think of one thing in this conversation with him and it connects with another thing. And so you quickly can get a lot of information from one person. So I think it would be hard to have a laser focus on one thing. They all are so connected.
Right.
Oh,
Alice?
Oh, yeah, I'm not even muted. I agree with what Erica said, what Rita said, and of course, what I said. Because I think we actually were charged with looking at the funding or these certain areas. We need to get that task done. And I think this is a great way to do it. And what Erica says is very cogent about being efficient and not taking too much, expecting too much of one person or one effort in one city. So yeah, I go with the first option of determining what our central areas of focus are and asking for a response from various cities, which is probably a determined list at first. We want to make sure we have these 20 cities or communities or places. I think using places is a good way to go too, not just identifying cities. And that way we have really focused information that is also integrated in the effort. So I support that first way of going about it.
Excellent. Sarah?
I agree. And I think, if there's just one subcommittee, if only half of I think if we can define however many people are in the subcommittee, or if the whole group wants to do this, those common criteria, the same questions, I think that'll take a lot of that variability out of it. And, if there's 6 of us doing this, I think, we split up into groups of 2, do the interviews. And I think it would make sense to sort of come back together and look at all of the funding answers together and see like what we see, emerging as trends, or if there's different information that we need to collect, and maybe we can sort of do both of the ways that you described. But like Erica said, I think that we just need to contact somebody one time because these people are really busy.
Yeah.
Sure. Alice, do you have anything else to add?
I did. Yeah, I don't mean to be a stickler for technicalities, but I'm going to. I think the way that is described in our bylaws, we need to be careful about the number of people in one committee. We can name the committees differently and still have a committee, but I think 3 to 5 is as much as we'd want to have. An even number, or an odd number of people, but really a small number, so that we're not. It's hard to organize a community the way we are structured. We're on Zoom here, but we need to be able to actually do the work together without having the difficulty of a larger group decide what we're going to divide and divvy up and so forth. So I would recommend a few committees or related committees with a few people at a time.
So I agree with all of these things. And I think that I'd like to make a couple suggestions. Obviously, for bylaw purposes and certain for Open Meetings Act purposes, we want to make sure we're in compliance here. I'd like to make a couple of suggestions. One, as it relates to criteria that we want to make sure we cover, it's really important that we be inclusive of all of the folks on the Council of the Commons with collecting that information. And secondarily, in the same vein, making sure that we are all submitting ideas for communities to research. And so I'd like to ask everybody to make sure that, and maybe Heather, for those who are not in attendance tonight, if you could put out a call to action for all the council members here to make sure that they are communicating back with you, around communities of interest that we want to look at and criteria of interest that we want to make sure we tackle. The second thing is I'd like to suggest that, to Alice's point, maybe we have a small group of folks, Heather, myself, or Alice, one of the two of us, doesn't have to be both of us, and then maybe Frank and or Rita or both get together and just talk about bringing all of those thoughts together and dividing up into some subcommittees. And so Frank and Rita, I mentioned this because you had the grand thought of this process, and I think that it's a really good one. So maybe we can do that. We can create the committees based on that and send the information back out to council members, and then we can initiate dividing up based on that to create these committees based on a common criteria and a common set of communities of interest to look at here. And then we can move forward to Alice's point with a small number of people with common criteria, common communities of interest, in a subset, of course, and go from there. So I'd like to make that, I guess, is my suggestion for how we break up this work. And then maybe we have this small initial working group of Heather, either Alice or myself, and Frank or Rita, to divide that up. Is that a suggestion folks are good with? And we do that in a very short period of time, by the way, like within a week, so that we can move forward.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay. Any objections, I guess is a better way to describe it on Zoom. Okay. So hearing none, seeing none, why don't we move forward with regard to that? And so I'd like to ask that everybody from one, Heather, submit or send out a request to all council members, requesting information around communities of interest that we're interested in investigating and criteria of interest. And then simultaneous to that, we will get small group of folks together here to take in that information, not limit it down by any means, but try and organize it and also break us all up so that we can investigate based on that. And then we'll set some criteria to Rita's point around time frame and try and start utilizing our monthly meetings to report back this information, try and build upon it, learn more, and utilize it as a learning tool to inform our discussions about the long-term proposal going forward. So I feel like unless there's any objection to that, that feels like a good next step to me.
Well, it's great.
Okay. Are there other comments or questions around the community partnerships or agenda items specifically on the agenda this evening? I don't see any. Are there any other agenda items that folks would like to have on the agenda this evening?
I guess I would just like to ask that we start talking about figuring out how we're moving forward with a physical design.
That was one of the 4 categories of interest that I was thinking of.
Sorry.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Erica, because you reminded me that this is something that is tangible as well. And we have, for instance, one category of interest, the criteria of interest is like, are there any other built on a parking lot, a parking garage, an underground parking garage? Well, maybe there are some. I know there's one in Chicago. So that would be one, or a whole block, center inside of a whole block with a perimeter, these physical characteristics are something we're going to have to deal with one way or another. And so it'd be good to see if they're, wow, I never thought of that. They've got pretty much the same situation. Okay, good. So I think if we think about our physical characteristics and how their potential is there or not, maybe some are more or low hanging fruit. But I think that physical aspect is very important because it's something people can see and think about as opposed to these sort of arcane areas, which we must deal with. But finance and funding is sort of like science fiction. But physical is right there. So that's my suggestion. I think that's a good idea.
Frank?
Frank, you need to unmute.
Yeah, it turns out, again, in conversation with Mr. Cowan, that Grand Circus Park is built above an underground parking structure.
Mm-hmm.
And that Campus Martius and another park downtown Detroit have basements under them. I don't know what he quite meant by basements, but there's a level below for mechanics of fountains and storage and stuff. So there's, yeah.
You got it.
Yep.
Other points. I think we're going to learn a lot from this exercise, by the way. I think this is actually going to be very interesting for many of us here.
Jeff has his real hand up.
Yeah, please feel free.
I do have a real hand. Yeah, I totally agree, and Alice is absolutely correct. The only thing I would say is I think in doing that, we should not forget what Adam said earlier, which is maybe we should not limit ourselves to just what we're seeing right now in terms of a space that we have available to us.
Mm-hmm.
Try to imagine, at least in one of our scenarios, possibly of the future, working back from there, a broader vision of what the center of the city might be. I'm not talking necessarily about the software part, the human part, but I'm thinking more of the physical space itself. That it may be that we come to realize that it may be important to have a broader center of the city than we have and rearrange some of the pieces that are there into a greater extent with the collaboration of our block partners and other people in the city to truly make an innovative and unusual and powerful statement, center of the city statement. So that's one thing. And I don't think we can totally ignore the human element. I mean, we do, as part of that imagining of the future, we have to have, I think, a stronger idea or a stronger set of possibilities about what we're actually trying to achieve. What is our end goal? Or several possible end goals. To some extent, the physical structure is dictated by the geology and the geography and the urban structure, but it also has to be dictated by the kinds of human relationships we want to achieve in the future for our city. Okay.
Excellent points, Jeff. I think we got a few hands up. I'm not sure whose hands carry over from the last line of questioning. So I'm going to go Rhea, Alice, Allen.
I'm going to repeat myself. I also want us to make it for a future agenda item to really start thinking about a plan for our group. So we've got some really solid things that we're starting out. I really like it, but I think that's just part of it. So I think there is kind of like another set of steps that I'd really like to see written down so that we know we have them as tasks.
I think that's a very good point. Very good point. Alice and then Alan.
Yes, I think a calendar is a great idea, sort of a calendar. And also, we were talking about the physicality of the place. I think the connections between physical places is important too. I mean, lately we've heard about the train station plans kind of at least going on pause, if not imploding. But the minute I thought of that, we have an opportunity, just like we had an opportunity with another sort of debacle recently with the food trucks. That our center of the city is logically the first place that people might want to go from the train station, or it might be one of the major destinations on the tree line that is projected to go to William Street or up to William Street or something like that. So this should be a destination, a physical destination that's connected to other physical destinations,
Absolutely.
including the park system. So you've got an actual park right there. It's a connection. Where do you go from there? Maybe to the playground park that's up between the train station and the center of the city, that little place on 4th, I think, as you go down to the depot. Connections. So I think it's important to think of the connections between the physical spaces as well as their role as a destination.
Agree with that. Alan.
Yeah, I'm all in accord with this. But going forward in this comparative searching for more information, I don't want us to lose to engage our block neighbors, particularly the Norton people and the library, as elements in what is possible and other plans that are going to impinge upon or coordinate with what we are doing. So I think that the local organization, and as this conversation began, connection with the Main Street, State Street business associations and our own community, we need to be doing our community organization right here, as well as looking what is we can learn from other places.
Yes, if I'll just interject a short little thing. What Alan is saying reminds me of libraries and their parks. Bryant Park in New York, next to the Metropolitan Library, and we have the potential of having our own little park attached to our own library. And there are many other aspects too. There are museums that have parks attached to them and so forth. So it's a great deal of potential in that.
Bryant Park has some very interesting topography issues too,
Yes,
which Alice probably knows about.
Let us not forget also that there are some major structures going up right now as we speak.
Yeah.
In the area, and Alice has referred to this before, and some others that, so all these people are going to be there and they're in these structures. They need a place to go to. And so we need to bear them in mind as well and see what their input could be.
So I think we've got some really good ideas. We've got a couple of action items that for all council members. One, to reiterate, is ideas around communities of interest that we want to target, and be an inclusive list. We had a great process for this, for submitting ideas for the city council resolution last time. I'd like to repurpose that same process and utilize it for both communities of interest and also criteria of interest. And then we're going to have a small group of folks, Heather, myself, Alice, maybe Rita and Frank, break that down and take that list and divide up everybody and try and correlate it to a common set of criteria of interest with a diverse set of communities of interest, and break up into some subcommittees based on that. So we will take that action item. We're going to try and do that within the next week so that we've got 3 weeks before the next council meeting. And we will assign some homework for those subcommittees to report back in some type of organized fashion at the next Council of the Commons meeting. So, and this can be an agenda item. Rita, to your point, we're on the long-term agenda. We'll utilize this to inform that long-term agenda. Don't know really what that's going to look like at this point, but certainly we will figure that out. So I feel like we've got some good direction, at least. We're on some shorter term action, longer term visioning items out of this meeting tonight. So unless there are further conversation on this agenda item, I'd like to open it up for public comment. And I am pretty adamant, it's 9:03. I would really like to hit our 9 o'clock mark at some point here in our in our process.
Oh, Adam, didn't we start about 3 minutes late? So
we may have started 3 minutes late, so maybe we're even. But we've been about 20 minutes late every other time, so we got some time to make up. So any other comment on this agenda item, if or we get to open up to public comment?
3 in the morning here.
And to Alan's benefit, obviously here. Heather, do we have any members of the public who'd like to comment?
We do. We have a hand up. We have Robert Black. I'm going to allow you to talk now.
I'm not going to take 3 minutes. I'll make this very quick. I want to applaud you guys again, watching your alignment and connection to each other respectfully and working through confusing and conflicting issues that show up both within the group and outside the group is exemplary. I think Alice hit one right on the head that you need to resolve very quickly, which is the confusion about naming. Who's involved within this group? What are they called? And then what is the name of this group and the place you're looking for? Is it a commons? Is it center of the city, which I love? It evokes certain images. That's very powerful. And, you know, Alan talked about a bottom-up process. There's also a thing called inside out. You have the outside shaping forces, which are other ideas, like Jeffrey mentioned, from his outside thing, and the issues from the past. There is a park in California, in Berkeley, that's called Kaiser Center, 5-story parking structure, which was at the time in the 1970s, the largest urban park on top of a parking structure that won awards all over the place in urban planning. One of the members of the initiating committee, Chad, used to walk to work through that park. You might want to talk to him about some examples of what works and what doesn't. It has 2 fountains on it. It's beautiful. And it's a concrete structure, purely. Anyway, just quickly, this outside in process then is from within you. And you already have a number of criteria at your disposal through the great efforts of the task force. And also there's a bunch of work that's been done within the initiating committee that could be helpful to you in terms of creating a structure for this, understanding the criteria. And then lastly, I just want to support Rita's idea of a plan. Were I facilitating this meeting with you tonight, I would have a number of pieces on the board up there that are large words like learning and criteria and framework and insight and innovation, things to inspire you. There's a process called visual listening, where you take these images and you put them in front of you and you start to create another idea that inspires you in the larger community. And then also just in terms of a larger time goal, I want to reiterate Alan's mention. I just did a thing with this museum at 200 years old. You talked about Detroit at 300. In 1824, Ann Arbor was chartered and founded. So in 2024, what's that number, right? So think about that as a time frame and use that as a catalyst, and you will start to create things like they're doing in Detroit. I could go on, but I just want to applaud you for your beautiful work together, and I wish you good luck in continuing. And lastly, I'll just say Adam's thing about when you take this perception of a conflict as an opportunity to build partnerships, that attitude and the strength of your commitment to, you know, really understanding and listening to other people will pay dividends as you move forward, and any resistance you meet will be easily overcome, I tell you. So thanks again, and good luck in the next few weeks with your work.
Thank you for joining us this evening, Robert. Any other members of the public? Heather?
No, that's it.
All right. Well, with that, can we get a motion for adjournment? A second? All right, excellent. With that, I think we are adjourned. We are only 8 minutes over, so I take that as an improvement.